Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake and I'm the education assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are not underneath an osmanthus. We really wanted to be underneath an osmanthus. This program for you today is top plant picks, scents and sensibility. We wanted to show off the wonderful fragrant flowering plants this time of year, and osmanthus is obviously the first on everybody's list, but of course they already bloomed. They had an early start this year, and that's fine. Getting ahead in life is always a good thing, and those of you that come out to the Arboretum regularly got to enjoy them already, so it's been a good thing. But we've got Tim Alderton, our research technician, here today, who's pulled together a list of a few of his favorite plants this time of year that have wonderful scents that are showing off their flowers and their foliar characteristics as well. So this should be an interesting program. Alrighty, those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I can pass things over to Tim to show us the most delightfully scented plants in the garden this time of year.
Ready? Okay. So yeah, I guess it's they came up with the title Scents and Sense of Scents.
You got it.
Sense and Sensibility.
Sense and Sensibility.
I didn't come up with this, so
it's hilarious. It truly is.
I mean, and as Blake was saying, I was hoping that we might have some osmanthus in flower still. Even the one, I love osmanthus fragrance, and last week they were in flower. There was actually just over this direction, there was still an Berlandiera in full flower and a Thunbergii in full flower, and it was just wafting through this area. But then there was this little bit of wind and rain that we had last week.
Just a scooch.
And on the other side of me, there was back in here, there was osmanthus fortunii, which I don't like the fragrance of fortunii.
Why?
It's kind of coconutty, and I'm not fond of coconut. Yeah.
You don't like coconut?
I don't like coconut.
Oh, that's okay.
So it's not my favorite fragrance, but I went and looked at it to see if by some chance there's like 2 florets on the whole 20 by 30 foot shrub. So,
but an honorable mention to osmanthus, even if it isn't in our top plant picks for this month, it should have been. I mean, and it should be in your plant picks as well.
The ones that were in flower, the orange and that is Berlandiera forms, and the Thunbergii, they only flower about once a year. There is one form of Berlandiera that has now become available, Apricot Echo, which we have in the garden, and it's even out of flower right now, but it sporadically flowers most of the year, as well as the white flowered forms will often flower more sporadically throughout the year. But yeah, we missed out those for right now. But they could be flowering in a few weeks yet. That is the Apricot Echo and just the straight fragrance. So who knows? But they're off my list for today.
That's okay.
So I kind of just broke this up. It's not that many plants, but I broke it up into the plants that were going for the flower fragrance and then into the foliage fragrance. Excuse me. So I have a longer flowering list, and I have a few of them in front of me, and we have some slides so you can see them a little easier. But one of the first ones I have here, and there's a better picture of this one, way better. This is already wilted very well, even though I just picked this. This is a Berlandiera subacaulis, which is, one of the common names is Florida green eyes. It's Florida chocolate flower to me, and hence the fragrance in this one at the right time of the day is chocolatey. This one actually can start flowering for us as early as March, late March and into early April, and that's actually probably one of the better times to see it. But there were still a few of them coming back out, and with the cooler nights again and the adequate moisture that we've been having. They are coming back into flower and growth and doing a little bit more after the warmth of the summer. So the fall is a good time that you can smell those as well. This species, subacaulis, is actually endemic to Florida, but there are some other species that are both native here in North Carolina and throughout the eastern half of the United States. We have, I believe, pumila is throughout the eastern southeastern U.S., including North Carolina, and I think lyrata, is in more of a southern plains and into Texas, where I've actually been able to see it in the wild there as well. But I have seen this one in Florida a few years ago in late February of all times. In the wild flowering, but yes, for a light chocolate fragrance, it is an interesting one to have. So Berlandiera subacaulis. So going on that chocolate theme, and it's actually a kissing cousin if you think about it, is one that I think of more of the late summer and the fall at this time of the year. And that's part of the reason I kind of picked up the Berlandiera first, because it's a little bit better known, but is Cosmos atrosanguineus. This is the chocolate cosmos, and it's native to Mexico. It's kind of more akin to a dahlia than that of the cosmos. And I can lightly smell it right now. It's actually just down to the side of me here in the border. And I planted these this summer. This is the first time I've grown them here in this area. It is reported to be hardy to zone 7. So though some other places say it's not quite that hardy, but who knows? Our weather has gotten so mild here. My first experience growing this plant, though, was probably about 30 years ago. I bought a plant from Logi's and had it for a few years. And I stored it in our basement through the winter because this is, like I said, it's much more akin to a dahlia and not like the traditional Cosmos bipinnata, or bipinnata and Cosmos sulphureus that we typically grow that are annuals for us. This has a tuberous root system, so you can dig that tuberous roots up and store them like you would dahlias in cooler climates, and often get them to survive either way. The flowers on them, I don't know. I'm hoping you can see in the presentation or my slides that very dark red burgundy. It's almost black, and some would call it a black cosmos as well. So if you want a little noir feel to your garden, a dark feeling, this could be one. And again, it flowers most prolifically in the late summer and fall.
I'd like to add that the photographs, it looks wet and shiny.
It is wet and shiny. Here
where it's dry, those petals are very velvety.
They are velvety. I took it the picture the other morning whenever, I don't know when we had any rain, but we're gonna see if we can get another close-up picture of the ones I had in my hand. But it is flowering just down the pathway from me here. And there's variation. Most of what was available commercially for the longest time was all vegetatively propagated. They have been getting it back into seed production. So there is some variation in the seedlings, I believe. And these must be seedlings, because this one here is actually quite bizarre, and it has cut petals. So, and I just thought it was an abnormality on the plant, but the whole plant is this way. So I was noticing that, and I was reading online that and they always say that they're rare but apparently it's really common in Mexico. It's just to sell them, they say it's rare. But my guess is we've only brought in so much germplasm over the last 150, almost 200 years that this plant has been known. They found it in I think the 1870s. Oh, so actually 150 years. Or so. So anyways, I've lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. There has been limited germplasm brought in, so that's why it was rare. They were only vegetatively propagating it for the most part, and what they brought in would not set seed because it was so little germplasm. Nothing was there to outcross. But today we're getting them grown from seed, and you can buy seed from these, as well as there are some selections now that are vegetatively propagated that are a little improvements over the original material that was here. But a really dramatic color that you don't often see at least in Cosmos.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's quite attractive.
No kidding.
Going on here a little bit, we're gonna go to something that is much more common here in this area here, and it's especially at this time of the year. And I can't set this one down and have you take a picture of it because it won't show up. And this is one that's a pass-along plant. This is Hedychium coronarium, or coronaria, I have to look. Coronarium, I was right the first time. This is actually, it's a later flowering species, but there's lots of hybrids and selections that have been made of different hedychiums or ginger lilies that we have in the garden here and that are available that flower much longer period of the year than right now. But this is probably still one of the best ones for fragrance, and for individual flowers are very large on this. The impact is nice, and it's very consistent, very vigorous. And like I said, it's a pass along plant. So if you the first time I actually saw this hedychium was back home in Pennsylvania, probably when I was 8 or 10. Our neighbors from my grandparents' next door neighbors, they had been to Hawaii, and this is when it's very commonly grown there. And they had brought it back, had a big pot, and they had no place for it. And we had it for a few years, and then it got left out in the cold night, and they're not hardy yet there. But anyways, I remember this as, they called it Hawaiian ginger, but it is one of the white ginger lilies, and it's an excellent plant for its fragrance, and it's like actually overwhelming to have it around here. Everything else, I hate to say it, the chocolate, you almost can't smell it because the Hedychium coronarium is too close to me, and I only have one stalk. But then there's another patch just over here in the Lawrence border. So where this cutting came from, this piece came from that I'm using here. It is very much worth growing in your garden, though you do need to give this one a little bit of space. It does, like I said, like to spread, and it gets about 4 to 5 feet tall. It's not an enormous one. There are some selections of Hedychium that can get up for words of 8, even 10 feet. This is in comparison a little bit compact, but like I said, they spread by horizontal rhizomes, and this is one that does that readily. So my next one, though, on the other hand, is a newer one. This is not the pass down plant that everybody has. And this is just actually to my side over here again in the perennial border. This is a selection called Hedychium Molten Gold. It's a dwarf hybrid Hedychium. It still has a light fragrance. It's nowhere as powerfully fragrant as the coronarium, but this is, I think it might be a really good one for the small garden because it's touted as growing only 2 to 3 feet tall, and it is staying in about the 3 foot range, maybe 3.5 over here at most, which is compact for a Hedychium. And I've had it in the ground for a little over a year. It has not spread out at all. It has a tight crown instead of the spreading rhizomes of pretty much the rest of the common Hedychiums that we're growing. So it looks nice throughout the season. It doesn't flower though until late in the summer again. It's flowering now at about the same time as the Hedychium coronarium. There are a lot earlier flowering ones, but I think this is one really worth growing in our smaller landscapes that we have today. Unlike the coronarium, which you just have to dig up and keep on giving to neighbors whenever it starts to outgrow its space. This one I think is going to be a little bit more better behaved. The flowers are a little bit more spidery on it than the coronarium, which has a much larger individual floret in the petals on it versus the sepals. The sepals are a much different size, but it's very compact, very clean foliage on it. It just looks nice as a specimen plant in the garden through the summer, even when it's not in flower. It's just a nice, clean green foliage in a kind of a vase-shaped plant. So, and the base is only a foot or so across, while the top is like 2.5 to 3 feet across. So, it's nice and compact. I think a good choice. And I think I had a few pictures of that as well. And you can see the plant in the garden, as well as a close-up photo I took, I think last week, of that one. And I'll make a note of that. Behind us, we had Hedychium Daniel Weeks, which I did not put on my list, but that is another really well-known hybrid. It starts flowering much earlier in the summer. I'd say as early as late June, early July. So it's a much longer flowering one, but right now it's past most of it on its, most of the flower stalks have finished, so there are a handful still coming up. And that is the great thing about so many of the Hedychiums. They will flower, some of the bigger ones can actually flower over a longer period of the season and give you some really nice fragrance as well as flowers too. And I like them. They give you that tropical look, much like a canna, but unlike our cannas, which are now being infested with canna leaf roller around here, they stay clean as ever, and so they look nice even when they're out of flower. So that is my next ones there. So some people are probably growing, and this is going to be really droopy right now. It says, I cut you, and anyways, and it likes to be droopy during the day anyways and perk up at night, are the brugmansias, or angel's trumpets. I don't have many in the garden actually, but this is one that we've had, I'd say, I didn't look up since we probably got this in 2006 or 2007. It's a really good, compact, early flowering selection that repeats. So many of the brugmansias we grow, the most common is probably Charles Grimaldi, which it gets 6, 8, even 10 feet tall, but doesn't start flowering until late September or October, just before frost. And you'll get a couple flushes sometimes on those. This one, on the other hand, starts flowering as early as 2 feet if you're growing in a container. In the garden, after several years, it'll get 3 to 4 feet, and then it'll start to flower actually out in the garden. And you'll get periodic flowering through the summer and flushes, starting as early as July, which is a big improvement over so many of the brugmansias. And it's not fragrant right now, but the great thing about brugmansia is they're nocturnally fragrant. So this is something you want to put closer to your where you're going to be walking in the evening, whether near your sidewalk, your doorway, a window that you might have opened actually in the fall when it's cooler enough to open your window and not let in more heat than ventilation. They are droopy during the daytime, and then again they perk up and they release an intoxicating fragrance through the night and the cool of the evening and into the morning. But our plant has been out near the Visitor Center and the McSwain Center, like I said, I think since 2006 or 2007. It's about 6 or so feet tall right now and is literally covered in hundreds of flowers right now. It's been flowering for a good week or two, and it'll go on maybe for another week or so, and then it'll take a break. We might get another flush again before we have a hard frost too. So the other thing about this one, if people are growing brugmansias in containers, it's much smaller and manageable. Like I said, this can be flowered at as small as 2 feet. So this is one that you don't have to give up your whole house to store in the winter. And plus, brugmansias you can actually cut back really hard and they will come right back out. Or you can grow them into a small tree, but no need to do that with this one and still get wonderful flowers on it and the fragrance that comes along with that. So Brugmansia Inca Sun, and I think I had some good photos of our specimen in the garden. From there, let's see, I have one more flower I'm going to do here. And this is one you might think of, what? This is a camellia actually. This is Camellia sinensis. So this is where tea came from. And I didn't have any tea for lunch today, so I am actually kind of dragging. I'm lacking my caffeine, and I'm thinking I almost need to chew on some leaves here, but I'm doubting I get enough caffeine right now. But they are lightly spicy fragrant to me. I'm terrible at actually describing it unless it's an outright, really distinct fragrance. I've known other things like it, but many of our early flowering camellias don't have, or actually many of our camellias that we grow don't have a distinct fragrance. So there are some that do, but most of them would be from some other species. And it's like one, it's a hybrid, which I really like. It flowers in February, not now, is Cinnamon Cindy. And there's, I think, Sensation, which is a sister seedling of that. But anyways, they have decent fragrance, and it's clovey. This is not clovey to me. It's a very different fragrance. And I'm not going to describe it, but anyways, it's not bad, and it is nice. And this plant is a lot smaller than a lot of your other camellias, as are the flowers too. But a nice shrub that you could actually use this as a foundation planting. As a lower plant than you would the larger growing Camellia japonicas and some of the sasanquas that we grow that get so much bigger. These are much easier to keep down a 4 to 5 foot range instead of the 6 to 12 foot, maybe 15 foot, depending on the selection of Camellia. And it tends to be much broader spreading, not so upright like a lot of the japonicas are in particular. giving you more of a column of growth than. So you could swap this out with your Autoluca hollies, I think, or Autoluca, I mean, not hollies, cherry laurels, and or even holly-wise, you could swap it out with a Japanese holly, for that matter, and get a similar shape and structure. But you have the added bonus of having these white fragrant flowers in the September, October into November, sometimes a little bit later than that as well. So, and if you really wanted to, you could shear it and you could make some tea, which I could really appreciate some right now. The flowers are small. They're only about an inch and a half across, but they have this great big cluster of stamens on them that just glows there against the 4 or 5 white petals that they have. And the ants are enjoying them here as well. So that's the last of my flowers. So now we're going to go to just a couple of plants that I like for their fragrance. Some of them are more year-round, and some of them are much more seasonal. Actually, 2 of them are more year-round, or not necessarily year-round, but longer season. But the one here I'm really going to highlight is Nepeta chartreuse on the loose. This is one I've really been liking. I planted a plant a year or so ago, again, not terribly far from this point, but I planted a whole bunch more of them since then. We had this in our plant sale this spring and no one wanted to buy it, and I don't know why. They don't look like much in a pot, I will say that. But the reason to grow this plant is for its flowers, which mostly come out in the spring, but also for the season-long chartreusey or yellowy green foliage. It just glows, and it only gets about 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 on a really tall shoot, inches tall. But it'll form a mat. An individual plant form a mat 3 feet wide in 1 year. And going to the fragrance. I smell some clove and some cinnamon on these. It's a spicy fragrance, and I just adore it. So this is one of the cat mints. So your cats may also adore this too, though this is not to the extent of catnip, and it's not as pungent as that. This is a much more pleasant fragrance than catnip, but I do love this plant, and we've just been growing it, like I said, for 2 years. So some of the other Nepeta Farinaceae types are equally as fragrant as this, but I love the added bonus of the foliage on this. And we are getting a decent reflowering right now, and a lot of the other Nepetas will give you an okay flowering, again, late in the season. They kind of sit there through the summer. They look okay, and but they will sulking a little bit, but then they pick up as we start to have cooler nights again. And that's what's happening now with my chartreuse on the loose Nepeta here. So that's a little bit on the small side, but then this is very droopy now. We'll have to show the pictures of this. This is one, actually my interns always love this, and I think one of them may have talked about it this summer again, but I'm even going to mention it. This is, because of the fragrance, it's root beer. It's subtle, or sassafras. That's the other, root beer or sassafras. And I grew up a sassafras tea, which we would go out and dig. You don't have to dig the root for this smell. So they commonly call this root beer plant. It's Piper Arboretum, which is from Latin America. That is Mexico, south to southern, or it's in northern South America. And it makes a great ornamental, which is probably at its peak at this time of the year. Is why I'm kind of highlighting it. In the summer, it's growing. If we have a dry period, it is my first indicator plant. It actually looks more like this shoot I have here, sulking on a hot, dry day. But now that we have cooler nights and we've had just a tiny speck of rain, our plants are rather vigorous and very well, they are as content as ever. Our plant has grown, it dies to the ground in the winter for us, and it's gotten to about 4 to 5 feet tall this summer. They can, if you get it in I wouldn't plant it, like I said, I would rather plant this for a place that it will dry out periodically, because if it's in too wet of an area, I have a feeling it will spread excessively and form large patches. So unless you have that type of situation, I would want to have a big patch of it spreading everywhere. I wouldn't keep it in a drier spot that you can control its water source.
It's really dramatic if you got a big patch.
It is so cool. The leaves can get over 12 inches. I mean, And the flower spikes are so spectacular too, to add to that. This is the flower spike. If you can see that. There are some in the pictures if you look closely. They are just like a tail. It looks like a rat's tail chopped off, a white rat's tail.
For sure.
And it has that texture too.
Yeah, it really does.
So it is an interesting plant. They use it culinarily in Latin America. Again, in parts of Mexico, they actually often use the foliage to wrap tamales in, for instance. But it's also good to use to flavor meats and chickens and fish as well, from what I'm told. So I have not tried that myself. I grow it as an ornamental solely. But I do like this plant for its true tropical look, as well as where else do you, I mean, we don't have many root beer to sassafras scented foliage plants, aside from, actually sassafras doesn't smell that way until you dig into the roots. So that is my second foliage plant that I wanted to mention. And then the last plant I have to talk about, it's not quite at its ready state at this point, but a few weeks ago in my one clump it was. But this is from our weeping katsura tree, or Scentsibility japonicum. This is from, I think it's, oh darn, is it Mioka weeping or something like that? But any Scentsibility will do this if you have, you will get a fragrance from when the leaves begin to fall in the autumn. Or, for that matter, if we have a dry spell in the summer and then it gets water, it will release it or upsize the leaves that were damaged during the drought. And it will release a burnt sugar or cotton candy like fragrance, which I really find pleasant, or caramely fragrance is another way to describe it. And I mean, these are small trees, and I wanted to include a tree actually that had some fragrance at this time of the year sometimes. So that is why I chose Scentsibility japonicum for that. And just any form of Scentsibility japonicum will give you that. It doesn't have to be the weeping form. But those are my top picks for sense and sensibility.
Beautiful. I love it. You did a great job, Tim. So there were a couple of questions.
Sure.
Marilyn wants to know, when is the best time of year to dig and divide Hedychium?
I mean, anytime you have a sharp shovel that you and a strong back. Further north, you might not want to do it too late in the season. And actually, I'm not so certain how hardy this darn, what is he called? Molten gold is yet, but Coronarium, you could probably do it when it's in full leaf. You could do it when it's fully dormant in the winter. You can do it when it's in full flower. You can do it, just about any time for your Hedychium. And if it's one of the vigorous growing ones, and you'll be fine and dandy. There are a few of the smaller ones, which, like I said, this one that you might wait to late. I would wait until it just flushes in the late spring, early summer. Do your division then, and let it to reestablish really well through the winter months.
Okay. Marilyn would also like to know if deer eat Brugmansia.
If they do, they have really good stomachs, is all I can say. That is one of the plants that has, I think it's atropine in it. They die. It's a really nasty drug. Chemical, and I mean, if humans eat it or ingest it, they will literally hallucinate for days. Or they could die if it took too high of a dose. So I'm guessing maybe the same thing might happen to deer.
Yeah.
I'm not certain.
Sure.
I don't know.
Catherine's in the chat, our volunteer coordinator. She says that the deer haven't eaten hers yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's they must be desperate, I think. I don't even think the rabbits touch mine. It would be really nice if they did and then ran over in front of the traffic. I mean, start to hallucinate and wander a little.
Yes. Okay. Another question for Marilyn. She wants to know how you're so familiar with the texture of a rat's tail.
I don't. We did have a rat. I didn't even hold it this summer. We had that was the summer, like July. Or June. Sure. We had a lost rat that we found here on the property.
That's right.
It was it was a domesticated rat. Right. But I've seen pictures, the picture of a rat's tail. It looks like that leathery, hairless thing.
For sure.
I mean, it just has that.
Yeah.
I haven't actually dealt with too many rats.
I played
Sophia,
with-
on the other hand, has. She used to have pet rats.
I once watched a friend of mine's rats while they were away on vacation, and the flour on that feels just like it feels just like it looks, and it looks
Yes.
like a rat's tail's texture, and it feels like that too. Yeah. One thing you didn't mention about those flowers, which I noticed this year, they come out and they're droopy when they first come out, and then once
They do go erect?
they do.
Oh, I didn't even notice
They
myself.
become erect when the pollen is ready and
Okay.
it starts releasing the pollen. So, read into that how you will. I'm just going to just throw that out there and leave it there.
Yeah.
How about that? So, Vandy wants to know the tea camellia. What's the optimal sunshade exposure?
I mean, it'll grow sunshade.
There it is.
It'll flower and be denser in the more sun it gets.
Sure.
And if you were growing it for leaf production, I think they grow them in full blazing sun more or less. While
sure.
I mean, you can grow it as, I would say, partial shade to full sun would be ideal. But I've had them survive here in the garden next to our old holly hedge that used to be in Asian Valley. Is there still one down there? I can't remember if I still have one over there. And actually, this one came from one that's just over here that used to be right next to the holly hedge that used to be behind the perennial border, for that matter, and probably didn't get too much sun for years until we chopped down that holly hedge. And it grew. It didn't prosper. Now it's this dense thing, and I think I tried to get rid of it, and it's still there. So it's content as ever now.
Bree Arthur, who's one of the dear friends of our Arboretum, she says that camellias, the further south you are, the more sun they can take,
that's ironic.
It is. It's counterintuitive.
I guess through the winter you don't want to give them sun so they don't get burned. And when they they come out of dormancy in the winter months, and then not have enough water flow going to them, and then have shoot damage.
And Bree's down in Fuquay, and for her, Camellia sinensis is borderline invasive for her. It's real weedy.
She's having it seeding. Actually, I get seedlings here too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. She was acted like it was about to swallow her whole forest. So
I haven't noticed that many, and I was just there a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Well, it's a great plant either way. Useful and
like
beautiful.
I said, use it as a hedge.
Yeah. For sure. Okay. So Carolyn says, do you cut back these plants to encourage blooms? When and how often?
Which plant?
That's what I wanted to know. There weren't that many. Let's just run through them all.
I mean,
honestly,
nothing here really. No. Not really.
I mean, just let them all go.
You could cut back the Nepeta maybe in the summer when it's looking a little ratty, if you wanted to freshen it up a little more quickly. But I'd say no. I mean, the Hedychiums, they look fresh pretty much all summer until fall.
For sure.
As long as they are getting adequate water, and they can take fairly dry conditions too, but not dry.
Yeah. And like the visual texture of their foliage, I wouldn't want to interrupt that,
it looks, like I said, it's fresh through the summer months. The Brugmansia, I mean, all these are, excepting the Camellia and the Cercidophyllum, are going to die to the ground for us through the winter months here. So, I mean, even the Brugmansia will die to the ground for us outside, unless you're growing it in a pot. You can cut it back if you want to take cuttings before it gets frozen in the fall.
Yeah.
And which is very easy to do with Brugmansia. And I think if this were in a frost-free climate, it could be a shrub as well, but not here.
Yeah.
That is the Piper Arboretum.
For sure. And these are all relatively late blooming flowers, and we're at a time of year where there's not too much to be pruning. You really shouldn't be doing much pruning.
I mean, you wouldn't want to do it late in the year. If you were doing it, I mean, actually, if you wanted to control the height of a Brugmansia, you might be able to cut it back earlier in the summer, but you'd risk it not wanting to flower. That's why I said this is a really good one, because it flowers at a smaller size.
And that's another one, like its visual texture, it's just so dramatic out in the garden. Like, it'd be a shame to interrupt that too. So
I wouldn't recommend too much on these, except for to cut them back when they've been frozen back to the ground.
For sure. Cool. Well, that seems to be all of the questions that we have in the chat here for today. So thank you so much, Tim, for pulling together this presentation of your favorite scented plants for this time of year. thank you everybody for joining us on the midweek program today. We will be back next Wednesday. If I'm not mistaken, we got Dennis, our curator. He's gonna, yeah, Tim just breathed a sigh of relief there that it's not him, but it's gonna be Dennis. He's gonna be going over why Asian plants do well here. So that should be lots of fun, learning some fun stuff with Dennis. So we hope you all will join us for that. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.